Okay, today we're talking dark Celtic myth with the anthology Dark Tide 9 and Unholy Triquetra. And we have the three authors who have novellas in that anthology, William Meikle, Jason Parent, and Curtis Lawson. And I'm going to let them all introduce themselves now. So take it away, William.
I'm Willie. I'm a Scotsman, which you'll probably come to realise from my accent as we go along. I've been writing for 30 years now and been working with Crystal Lake for a few times over those years. And this new one coming up will take me back to my roots, and we'll be talking a bit about that as we go along.
Okay, Curtis.
My name's Curtis M. Lawson. I'm a horror author, comic creator, editor, game designer, podcaster, all sorts of stuff. And I generally tend to write a lot of mythological themed stuff anyways. So when Jason approached me about the Celtic thing, I was very excited about it. And I hadn't explored a lot of Celtic mythology in my fiction yet, so it was something that I was very interested in doing.
Okay, and Jason, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Jason Parent. I'm an author of horror, thrillers, sci-fi, and pretty much everything else that pops into my mind at the time to write. I've been working with Crystal Lake on a few other projects as well, and Celtic Horror really appealed to me. So I'm happy to be aboard on this project with two fantastic authors.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm interested in talking with this about you today because Celtic Horror is one of my pet thing. I love to write it. So, how did you guys all get involved in the project?
Jason asked me.
Yeah, Jason asked me. Yeah.
Okay, so we put Jason on the spot. Now, how did he get involved in the project, and why did he ask the other two?
Okay, well, I had been involved in an earlier Dark Tide project for Halloween, and I'd written a story that I absolutely loved that was Celtic in nature and did not really apply to the Halloween anthology. So I reached out to Joe at Crystal Lake and said, "Hey, do you guys want to do another Dark Tide with Celtic, with a Celtic theme?" And he was all for it, and he let me reach out to a couple authors, and I mean, who better than Wilkie with Celtic? And Curtis is just a fantastic author that I already had a connection with, so I figured I'd reach out to him as well after its success with the Dark Choir. I'm going to get the name wrong, but the Dark
Blackheart Boys Choir.
Choir Boys Club. Am I close? Dark Heart. No, I'm not good.
Blackheart.
It was a fantastic novel that I loved. Blackheart, dark black. I was close.
Close.
Sorry,
Okay,
Curtis.
so why don't you tell everybody what your book is about? Give us a little overview of the novellas you wrote. So we'll start with William.
Yeah. Mine is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I've got a mythos that I'm working on based on old houses with supernatural secrets, to put it shortly. They're houses where people can go and get in contact with the dead. They're a bit like haunted house stories, but you can also see people in alternative realities, or people in the past, or people in the future. The house is basically a TARDIS, if you're a Doctor Who fan. And these houses turn up all over the world in different spots. So I've got some little boxes I can put people in and get stories out of. And I've been working up a mythology of these. I've got novels and novellas. And this one is bringing it back to my Celtic roots. Back in Pictish times in Scotland, the Picts made lots of little markings on stones. There's Pictic stones scattered all over Scotland with little carvings on them. And nobody's really figured out what all these carvings mean. And I picked up on a bunch of those carvings and put them into this story and put them into one of my houses. And the story grew from there. So it's taking an early lot of Celtic stories and putting them into a haunted house tale and jumbling that mix in together with some Roman mythology in my case as well, and seeing what comes out of it. And in the end, I got a an origin story basically for my haunted houses. So this becomes a primal story in my mythos eventually.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Did I explain that well enough?
Yeah. Okay,
It's all jumbled up. It's lots of different things jumbled together, but I tried to fuse them all into one whole. But the main back history of it all is the little figures that march through the story. Carved figures on wood in the loft of the house, which just turn up one day in somebody's house. But they start getting into his head and beating a rhythm into him. And from that rhythm, the whole story builds up.
I got to tell you, Willie, when I first read it, when I remember I was talking to a friend of mine when that first scene where the markings first show up, and I thought that was just like the most like, and it was just the most subtle, terrifying kind of thing. Just going up into a space in your home and like having it be different like that, especially a space like an attic. And I remember I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, man, like I'm just blown away by like this little thing. Like these are the things as a writer that like just stand out to me. I was just really taken aback by that scene right there. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you. It's actually it's something that's been with me for a while. It came to me in a dream about 10 years ago, these little marching figures, and they've turned up in about a dozen stories of mine now since then, trying to find a different way of getting to where they all started and where they're all going.
Nice.
Okay, so tell us about your book, Curtis.
Well, I guess to preface it, there's kind of a tied thing with the stories. There's a plane crash, which has some impacts on all the stories, and mine is about a kind of a corrupt federal agent who's bringing an informant back to the United States, and this plane crashes, and they end up trapped in this. They both survive, and the informant gets away because this federal agent is basically bringing him back to get killed because he, as I said, he's corrupt. So the informant gets away, and the federal agent has to chase him down through this valley, and they end up in a confrontation, and some blood is spilled, which awakens an ancient god type thing named Baylor. And I was really looking at I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sure, but there's this, I'm obsessed with the idea of, I guess, like pre-gods, like Titans or Jotun or whatever, anything that came before the I guess gods of order in a mythology. There's always this like chaos, like pantheon before that. In Irish mythology, there's something called like the Fomorians, which I'm probably mispronouncing.
No, that's right.
Is it okay? And they were supposed to be this race that kind of populated Ireland before man and such. So I've touched upon like, I guess, beings like that before a lot in my fiction. So I thought it would be interesting to do that from a Celtic point of view. And I guess thematically, the story is about people not being able to escape a terrible situation, whether it's the federal agent being in this mobster's pocket, or the informant not being able to get away, or Baylor being bound in this valley. And yeah, it was a really fun story to write, and I liked being able to explore a mythology that I hadn't explored so much before. I'm of Irish heritage and Scottish heritage, but I've always had kind of I don't know, I'm going to get weird here. I've always had some issues with it because of the way that Christianity kind of stomped out pre-Christian Celtic tradition, and we like know so little about it. So much of it is missing, and I really appreciated being able to tie into what we do know, and kind of explore that. So
I meant to ask you actually. Have you read the Moorcock trilogy, the Prince of the Silver Hand?
No, I haven't.
They've got that's got all the Fomorians in it.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah, one of Moorcock's eternal champions is fighting the Fomorian gods in those books. You'd
Nice.
probably enjoy them.
I'm sure I would.
Yeah, I'm playing with the Fomorians and Baylor myself in my Arthurian series, so that's kind of
Oh,
interesting.
nice.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jason, tell us about your book. You're muted, Jason.
I am not technologically talented here. My apologies again. Yeah, my story takes place kind of in flight during a storm. All the characters in it you kind of learn about as the action is unfolding. A plane crash is ensuing, and the main protagonist. My story is divided into three parts. The main protagonist is a gentleman trying to return home on a flight over France, and they crash essentially in the French Alps, and he survives the crash only to suffer a greater ordeal when he comes upon this town in the woods. And you get the vibes of whether this town, they're obviously different than what he's used to, but not necessarily evil, and the storm is coming. So while that action's unfolding, I had the wonderful opportunity of interweaving the stories together in some respect. So in my part two, we go back to the night before, which is pretty much when Curtis's action is unfolding, and we see some of my characters and where they came from. We see some of the other stories characters or related characters, I should say, in Willie's case, because Willie's case takes place well after the crash. And then we follow an older woman through that story, and her ordeals with similar to Curtis, with the old Celtic kind of gods. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Cernunos would be the one I chose in that case, and then the third part kind of ties all the stories together, and comes to a rather fun end, I hope.
I like your ending.
Yeah.
One of the
And-
things I appreciated about the different stories too was, Willie had this kind of haunted house kind of vibe to it. Mine has kind of like vaguely cosmic horror-ish things, and Jason's is real folk horror-y, but they all tied together very well, and they all, I guess, have a little bit of that other thing. Like there's definitely folk horror stuff to Willie's. But I appreciated that we were able to explore a little bit different types of horror and still have it all connect well.
Yeah, I think they all work well together. They work well as a trio.
Yeah. Okay. Expanding on that, what Curtis was just saying. Besides the Celtic theme, what other themes and motifs did you work into your stories? What did you want to explore with them?
For me, it's Scottish history. There's several other parts of my story apart from the haunted house. There's a Roman section where the Romans are on the Antonine Wall and facing an insurgency from the local Picts. And then there's a section with an old warrior, an old British soldier from the Zulu Wars, Victorian era, talking about the marching figures again. So the marching figures appear in all the different eras, but they're all tied together with a bit of wood from an old tree. This tree is one I actually visited. There's a yew tree in a churchyard in Scotland, which is nearly 3,000 years old, and it's got little carvings on it as well. And that's where the basic ideas sprang from for the whole story, way back when I first visited it. It's supposedly the oldest tree in Scotland, so it's seen all of Scottish history. And I ended up having bits of it being used to build the house, which the story becomes all about. So it's tying the history together from the start of Scottish history to the end. I've got a degree in archaeological botany. And I spent my university time tramping around Scotland looking at archaeological sites. So I've walked the ground where a lot of these things take place, visiting chamber tombs and stone circles and all the old castles. So I've got a deep history of Scotland in my blood, basically, and I think some of that came out in my story.
Cool. Well, definitely look forward to reading that. So, what about you, Curtis? What these themes did you explore?
I think I mentioned thematically, it was really about the idea of trying to escape an inescapable situation, and you have, like, as I said, you have the federal agent who's kind of in the pocket of this mobster and can't escape that, and he's freaking out because his wife isn't answering her phone and she's trapped in this abusive relationship with him. And then you have the informant who's trapped in this whole thing with the mobster as well, and then Baylor who's trapped in the valley. So I guess a lot of it was exploring the idea of fate and whether one can escape fate or not, and kind of the things that we do that are self-fulfilling to keep us trapped in bad situations. So I guess a lot of times when I approach fiction, I approach it with that sort of theme in mind first, and then kind of build a story around that. So that's kind of what I did here. And then, as I said, I like going about old themes, pre-gods, pre-creation, so the idea of exploring the Fomorians again, and kind of that chaos deity, that pre-creation deity type thing, was another thing I wanted to explore.
And I think some of your idea of escape fitted with some of my story as well, about the guy who had a choice about staying in a house where he could talk to his dead wife over and over again,
Yep.
or actually becoming free of that and being free of the house completely. So some of the theme of my story, what's the word? I've lost the word. Anyway, we blended in a bit with some of your themes, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, what about you, Jason? What did you want to explore with your book?
I think with the first part, definitely the assumptions we make when we experience a new culture, and how we think we as humans tend to think we know everything without exploring, or we tend to assume we know what's going on, but we don't know anything. If we don't know anything about everybody has an opinion on every topic these days, it seems. So without education, without true knowledge, those opinions are often, if not usually, wrong. So it kind of approaches it from that perspective. The second part is escape in a different way, in death. Essentially, this woman is traveling. She's lost her husband, kind of lost herself in grief, and she's traveling to America to be with relatives that she hardly knows. So she's dealing with death as an escape to a possibly more dreadful fate, living with people that are just kind of after her money, after her, after who she what she can do for them, rather than what she is of value as a person.
Interesting. Sounds very deep.
Which I'm not, so probably not. No,
Jason's deeper than he lets on.
Okay, so the anthology is dealing with supernatural, mythological, dark stuff. So how did you go about creating an otherworldly dread in the books, or did you decide to go another path and do something else?
I think Curtis was saying earlier about mine. It's the instant hit of something turning up in your house that wasn't there before, and my whole story sort of grows from that. The house starts impinging more into this man's life, and as it goes along, it impinges more and more until there's nothing left for him apart from the house and what it wants him to do for it.
What Willie does excellently, I think, is uses music to create dread, even though you obviously can't read music in a sense. You hear this beautiful melody, and instead of it being beautiful, it's something that increases your terror.
Music's a big part of my life. I've been playing guitar badly for 50 odd years now. So the music's
So
turned up in an awful lot of my work.
I've only been playing guitar badly for 30 years.
Okay, so how'd the rest
me?
of you do the dread?
So for me, it was a couple different things. It was a little bit of claustrophobia with the plane. There's a cave that's a big part of the story in the valley itself. So there's a little bit of claustrophobia that I tried to use to build the dread. A little bit more vulgar and cheaply. I have this monster kind of thing in there that has basically like a fire burning in its stomach, and there's a scene where someone gets very painfully murdered or whatnot with fire. So I guess I used a little bit of gore and gruesomeness as well, and I like to. I've tried not to shy away from showing the real otherworldly stuff when the time arrives. So there's this, Baylor's in there as this kind of statue thing, but when the time arrives, I didn't shy away from letting that become something more monstrous and more literal. And I was talking to years ago, I was talking to John Langan about The Fisherman, which is one of my favorite books. And if you've read The Fisherman, at the end of it, it goes like real hard into the fantastical element. And I guess Larry Barron had told him, just lean into it, just lean in and go hard. So that's kind of what I decided to do with the end of this story, was just lean into that otherworldly, fantastical element as hard as I could.
So you gave the readers a good payoff.
I tried.
Okay, so what about you, Jason? How did you build the dread in your book?
Yeah, I try to focus on all five senses and leave sight for last. So I'll give an example. In the second part, the woman is stuck in her airplane chair, and the chairs in front of her are starting to accordion in towards her. So you're hearing the sounds of the chairs screeching across the floor. You're hearing the screams, of course, of the people up at front, but you're not seeing what's doing it. You're taking in the sounds, the new scents, the new feels as people are crawling over over each other, but you're not really seeing the danger until I'm building towards that, and it I hope works. We'll see, I guess.
That's interesting, because I think that's something that I have to usually think about after the fact, and I struggle with, is to focus more on the other senses. I think a lot of writers really rely on the visual and on sight. So I think it can be really powerful when a writer focuses on the other senses, especially perhaps before or over sight. It gives a kind of a unique feel, and perhaps a more powerful feel than when someone's just writing everything visually, which is, like I said, something I've struggled with.
Yeah, I love writing all the senses, especially the sense of smell, and that you can really get some interesting things for the readers when you add in just the little sense of things, because scent brings back memories so easily.
Yes.
The only one I have trouble with is smell, because I don't have a sense of smell.
Oh.
Broke my nose when I was 5 years old, and nobody noticed until I was 20. But by that time, it was too late to do anything about it, and I lost my sense of smell. And it was only ever come back once, and that's when I went scuba diving.
Really?
Yeah, and came back for about an hour after the dive, and then went away again.
Oh, I wonder if that was due to the difference in the pressure.
Must have been, yeah. The doctors told me I could. There's an operation they could do to fix it for me, but it's a fully major operation, and I've always said no. Yeah. I don't know any better. I don't fancy getting somebody poking around in my brain, basically.
Okay, so you touched a little on this earlier, but is playing in the Celtic myth something that you do often, or is it new to you?
Well, not just the Celtic myth, but all of Scottish history. I've done a lot of. I've written numerous novels and short stories based in Scottish history. Being a Scotsman, I didn't really have much option. My background is from small town Scotland, and I grew up with my granny had 6 sisters, and they all had daughters. So I grew up with a big squad of very strong Scottish women who like telling stories, and I've been hearing those stories from Scots women since I was a kid, and this has seeped into me. My granny also had a touch of what they call the sight. She always knew when there was something going badly wrong in the family, and that's something that's turned up a lot in my stories as well over the years. I see my granny's influence in a lot of what I write.
Okay, so what about the rest of you? Is it new for you, Celtic myth, or have you played in the playground before?
I've done a little bit. I had a short story about like a changeling kid or someone who thinks he's a changeling at least, and but mostly I've mostly worked with Norse mythology or kind of Lovecraftian stuff. But yeah, it was fairly new, and it's something I'd like to explore a little bit more after doing that.
Just to back, I forgot to mention my next thing that's coming out, which Curtis probably knows, is a Scottish anthology, a collection of my Scottish historical fiction. There's some Celtic stuff in there as well.
Is that the Haunted Scotland one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's coming soon.
Okay, so what about you, Jason? Have you done Celtic myth inspired stories before, or is this your first time?
Not really. As Curtis knows, I'm all over the place with what I write. So, yeah, I can't. I'm literary. I'm pulp. I'm funny. I'm not. I just can't pick a. I like to do it all. I like to try my hand at everything. I have dabbled in folk horror, and I really enjoy reading Celtic horror. I really enjoy reading Celtic mythology. I have this giant compendium from Flame Tree that they released these beautifully covered novels that's just Celtic, which I used actually as for research on this book, but mostly folk horror, the grim fairy tales kind of stuff I like as well. How I can weave that in with Celtic, that is something that really interests me, and I would love to explore again.
Yeah, it can be done. I actually did a Red Riding Hood story that's coming out in October in my collection that we did Celtic myth. So
I would love to read that.
One of the other things, as far as like mythology in general goes for me, is I like to do almost like a comparative religion thing in my writing. So like my first novel, there are these, the antagonist is, this outer god kind of thing, but there are 2 main characters, and one of them comes from a Scandinavian background, and he views it all through like a Norse lens, and then the other character has like a Native American background, so he sees it through a Native American lens, and but they're seeing the same thing, just kind of their perception is different based on their background. And I like messing around with different mythologies and seeing how they overlap or can be tied together, or how they are just kind of like tools for understanding something deeper than human understanding.
There's a good example of that, actually. I don't know if you've read the A. Merritt book, Dwellers in the Mirage, the old pulp thing.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it comes at it from Norse mythology on one side and Cherokee myth on the other.
All right.
And shoves them together into a lost valley in northern Canada. And it's probably the pulpiest thing you'd ever find, but it's well worth seeking out.
Nice.
I don't mind pulp.
Yeah, I don't mind pulp either.
okay, so what do you want readers to take away from your novella? Do you want them to be creeped out? Do you want them to leave them thinking, or do you want something else?
In my case, it's leave them thinking. This story is about the afterlife and various different ways that people experience it. I'd like to leave them thinking about some of the different ways that things might happen in the end.
For this one, I really just wanted to entertain people. It's a little bit it's a little bit violent. It's a little bit gruesome. As I said, I did want to explore some deeper themes, but for the most part, I just wrote this to be entertaining, and which is a little bit less pretentious than I usually am.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of entertainment. We can all use that. So, what about you, Jason? Did you want to creep him out or leave him thinking, or were you after something else?
Usually after just entertainment, pure fun. I want them to read it, not want to put it down, enjoy it all the way through, and just then maybe a week later, but be like, wait, what happened? Wait a minute, And then I wanted to stay with them a little bit later, and that they think not only was that a fun story, but then, oh my god, oh yeah, that happened. But I don't want it to hit them right away. I want it to hit them 2 months from now or something.
It's pretty wonderful as a reader when you are thinking about a book months after the fact.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the most difficult parts of writing this story? Did you get stuck on something when crafting the plot, or did a character give you trouble?
I got slightly stuck when the guy was talking to his dead wife, because just at this stage there's a pile of ashes on his mantelpiece, and there wasn't anything coming back from that until I had an idea that they could communicate through quotes from old films, which we were both in love with. So I've got bits of the Maltese Falcon in there, because him and his wife were both fans of the film, and they communicate in film quotes, and that got me past the block at that point, and it was good. I found it a fun way to build that into the story as well.
Oh, it does sound fun. Okay, so what about you, Curtis? Did you have a difficulty in any of the parts of the story?
Not in particular parts, but so I'd written it one way. I essentially wrote it from one character's point of view and realized that it was entirely too short. And so I decided to write it also from the other main character's point of view, and have 2 point of view characters. But I guess getting to that point, figuring out how to lengthen the story in a way that warranted lengthening it took some thought, but no particular parts really were like a hang up kind of thing for me. I did have to do some research at parts about what happens if you get shot with a flare gun and things like that.
Oh, the fun research.
Yeah.
We're on an FBI list now.
Right. There's a YouTube video that shows a ballistics dummy get shot with a flare gun. It's very gruesome if you look it up.
I've actually seen that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to look it up. So yeah. So what about you, Jason? Did you have any difficulties in any of the parts of the story?
Well, yeah, and it's Willie's fault actually, because I had to write a character from related to his story, and I had to make sure I got the words correct. I didn't change my spellings though, just so you know. There's no honor with a U in it. Sorry, I kept it all Americanized in my writing. But the character, like I changed bathroom to loo, for example.
Yeah, that's fun. Figuring out all the British stuff. I've done that. So, what was your favorite parts of writing this story? Do you have a favorite scene or a favorite character?
There's an old man turns up in mine to basically move the plot along and give some exposition. He basically just turns up on the guy's front porch one morning when he goes out for his morning coffee. There's an old man sitting on his porch, and the old man starts telling him stories, basically. There's another theme of my life is talking to old men to tell stories, mostly in pubs. And this old guy was based on an old man I knew, an old friend of my father's, and he helped the story along quite a lot. He was my favourite bit of it because I had some fun with him.
For me, it really was going back to like kind of the gruesome thing, it was a scene where that guy gets shot with a flare gun. It was just, it was really fun to write, and it one of the things that was interesting about that part, and I hadn't thought about this, but talking, Jason was talking about putting sight last. That whole scene takes place in a cave, so this flare is really all the light that they have. So it was really fun too to write an almost blind scene where you just have this very minimal globe of illumination, and everything else is just feel and sound and echoes. So that was a lot of fun to write.
Okay, so what about you, Jason? What was your favorite part of writing the story?
Well, I don't have children, but for some reason I seem to write children well. And there was this little girl who doesn't speak through the whole, and she's in all three parts. I'll tell you that much. But like chaos is just going on around her, and she's crawling under the seats of the airplane, like an annoying toddler might. Just having fun throughout the whole ordeal. And she's kind of like your hope, your heart, your everything in it. But also she's a playful, cute little girl that everybody should love, I hope.
Okay, so what are you guys working on now?
I'm on another one of my S-Squad books, number 17 in the series. I've got a group of Scottish squaddies who swear a lot, drink a lot, and fight monsters. If you probably imagine Gerard Butler in the main role, you're probably well on the way to thinking the style of the thing. It's a bit like Dog Soldiers beats a Ray Harryhausen B movie. I've had them fighting monsters all over the world so far, and this new one, they're in the Yucatan fighting chupacabras, and that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Oh, that sounds fun. So what about you, Curtis?
I've been kind of in I don't know, a slump, but I've been working on a book called Couch Surfing Through the 12 Chambers of Hell for a long time now, which is about a kind of aging rock star who's lost his wife and his child and goes on kind of a journey of self-discovery across Route 50, all from California all the way to the East Coast. And it mirrors the 12 hours of the Egyptian afterlife. And it's kind of about this guy facing what happened to his family and dealing with his grief. And but it's very surreal, and there's Egyptian gods and pubs and things like that. And so I've been working on that for a while, and hopefully I'll finish that soon. And I've been doing some editing on an anthology that I'm co-editing called 13 Possessions, and another one called 13 Dark Dimensions. So I've been working on some like more editorial stuff as well.
Coincidentally, I just recently sold an Egyptian mythology novella to Dark Regions for an anthology they're doing on Egyptian afterlife stories.
Nice.
Okay, so what are you working on, Jason?
I'm putting together 2 collections. One should be out fairly shortly with Weird House, and the next one probably next year, Halloween collection. New writing, not much. I'm actually editing a script right now that we're going to be putting forth to a particular film company that expressed interest. So, wish me luck. And then I have the first line, the best first line I've ever written. That's all I have is the first line, but it's the best first line I've ever written. So I don't know where I'm going from there, but we'll see.
And that collection that Jason mentioned is actually on my imprint at Weird House. So that's the first book in my imprint. So pretty excited to have Jason on there.
Thank you. Excited
Cool.
to be there.
So the 3 of us are all at Weird House now, as well as Crystal Lake.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap the interview up here, and I'll let all of you tell everyone where they can find you in your books. So, Willie, we'll start with you.
You get me at williammeikle.com. That's the easiest place. I keep my website up to date, and all my work's on there. So.
Okay.
CurtisMLawson.com, but also I'm on Instagram as Curtis M. Lawson. You can send me a Facebook friend request. I accept just about anybody as long as you don't have something really awful as your profile picture or something. And I'm on Twitter or X as at @C_Lawson.
Okay, so where can we find you, Jason?
AuthorJasonParent.com, and of course, all the social media sites: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Not on TikTok yet, though, but everybody keeps telling me I should be.
Ah, I know the feeling.
I went on TikTok and put some short videos on, but nobody looked at them, so I just gave up.
Okay, so I'd like to thank you all for being guests today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Crystal Lake for having us all on as well.
Okay,
Doing such a good job.
And that's it for this interview, and bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.